Ground control to Major Tom.
ODDTV.
Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground control to Major Tom. Commencing countdown.
Hey everybody, what's happening up in this piece? ODDTV is in the building! Okay! So let's talk a little more about this Buzz Aldrin clip where he subtly admitted that we didn't go to the moon. I've been getting a lot of comments on my last upload of that very clip. People say he was only talking about how we didn't go back to the moon. Let's run the clip.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened.
To me, Buzz is flat out saying that we didn't go. Buzz, why haven't we gone back to the moon?
Because we didn't go there, we didn't go there, we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened.
Now, this isn't just some sudden realization. This isn't the evidence. Though I'm glad that Buzz came clean, there is much more information available to show us that outer space is not what we are led to believe. Let's go over a timeline that I made. I tried to keep it as simple as possible. Alright, so in 1915, NACA was founded, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. NACA was established by the federal government, and their mission statement was, "It shall be the duty of the Advisory Committee for Aeronautics to supervise and direct the scientific study of the problems of flight with a view to their practical solution." In 1923, Disney was founded. Walt Disney, of course, grew up in the Demolay, a young boy's version of Masonry. Continuing on, in 1936, JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, was founded, in part by Jack Parsons, an avid follower of Aleister Crowley and a member of his fraternal organization, the OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis. Jack Parsons also hung out with L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of the Church of Scientology, which holds sci-fi-like religious beliefs, including the belief of a galactic dictator named Xenu. Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard both practiced black magic and participated in sex magic rituals together. In 1954, Walt Disney and the father of rocket technology in the United States, Wernher von Braun, meet and make 3 films about space exploration. One was called Man in Space.
Here to introduce you to this new series is Walt Disney.
In our modern world, everywhere we look, we see the influence science has upon our daily lives. Discoveries that were miracles a few short years ago are accepted as commonplace today. Many of the things that seem impossible now will become realities tomorrow.
Just a couple years later, in 1958, NACA is transformed into NASA, and the space program begins with projects like Mercury and Gemini. In 1966, filmmaker Stanley Kubrick meets with NASA employees as well as Arthur C. Clarke. Pretty damning photograph. 3 years before the first moon landing, Kubrick just happens to be running with NASA and a well-known author of science fiction books, who also predicted satellites in 1945. Arthur C. Clarke's work includes Childhood's End, which was made into a 3-part series on Sci-Fi Channel in 2015. Very interesting series with so-called aliens, but they look like the epitome of Satan, and they come to usher in the new golden age for humanity.
There is no need to be afraid.
In 1968, Arthur C. Clarke wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was developed concurrently with Stanley Kubrick's film version. Fun fact, between 1968, when the movie was made, and 2001, when the movie takes place, that is exactly 33 years. They did the exact same thing with 9/11. The Twin Towers began construction in 1968, and they were knocked down in 2001, exactly 33 years later. Anyway, this not only served as practice for Stanley Kubrick, as he was given pointers on how space should be portrayed by Arthur C. Clarke, but this was also mental conditioning for the masses. 2001: A Space Odyssey was the #1 movie in the box office in 1968. And 1 year later, in 1969, Apollo 11 claims to land men on the moon for the first time. President Richard Nixon called Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin from the White House to congratulate them.
Go ahead, Mr. President. This is Houston out.
Hello, Neil and Buzz. I'm talking to you by telephone from the Oval Room at the White House. And this certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made from the White House. I just can't tell you how proud we all are of what you have done.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a great honor and privilege for us to be here.
Meanwhile, I can't get cell phone service in the mountains here in Colorado. Later on in the same year, Apollo 12 lands men on the moon for the second time. Then in 1971, both Apollo 14 and 15 successfully land men on the moon. In 1972, both Apollo 16 and 17 also successfully land men on the moon. So that's 6 successful moon landings between 1969 and 1972. And it just suddenly stops there. In 1981, Masonic Television, aka MTV, begins, starting right off with the usage of Apollo footage and continuing to use the Apollo program as their theme to further condition the masses on a wide scale, especially the younger generation. Make the Apollo missions cool and hip. Apollo missions, they're the hip thing to do. If MTV wasn't ran out of a Masonic temple, it wouldn't be such a dead giveaway, but they do, and it so happens that many NASA astronauts and employees are Freemasons. Now it's 2018, and nothing has happened since 1972. It's been just over 45 years, and that's a lot of time to be stagnant after 6 back-to-back moon landings. Get this, not only did NASA lose the telemetry data for all the moon landings, but NASA now claims that they lost the technology that got them to the moon in the first place.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
This is why we can't go past low Earth orbit, according to them.
Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go.
The kinds of technologies that we're testing out on Space Station are definitely helping us with our goals of going beyond low Earth orbit.
Early in the next decade, a set of crewed flights will test and prove the systems required for exploration beyond low Earth orbit.
And this is really the beginning, I think, of human beings leaving low Earth orbit.
But I have a hunch as to why we can't leave low Earth orbit. Dome, 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 dome. Dome, 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 dome. Yeah, so they have conceived this idea of a layer of radiation that acts as an impenetrable barrier. It's called the Van Allen radiation belt, and it's code for the firmament. Another thing is that this radiation belt was present for the Apollo missions, so how did they manage to make it through? Let's ask Apollo astronaut Alan Bean.
Any ill effects from the Van Allen radiation belts?
No. Now, I'm not sure we went far enough out to encounter the Van Allen radiation belt. Maybe we did.
Beginning at an altitude of 1,000 miles and extending an additional 25,000 miles, lay lethal bands of radiation called the Van Allen radiation belts. Every space mission in history with humans on board, from both the United States and Soviet Union, from the first in 1961 to the present, has been well below this deadly radiation field. Mercury, Gemini, Soyuz, Skylab, the Space Shuttle, all maintained altitudes well below 1,000 miles. All except Apollo.
I don't know the distance to the Van Allen radiation belt, and if we did, it wasn't a problem. If we were going to encounter it, then we would have had to build the spacecraft and the spacesuit to not give humans a problem. You don't just build something and hope it works. You study to see what the threats are, the environment is, and then you say, how thick do I have to make the metal on the spacecraft so that going through this kind of radiation or these kind of meteoroids, it won't get hurt. And so then we build it that way.
The belts are 1,000 miles to 25,000 miles above the Earth.
Then we went right out through them.
No effects on your cells?
Didn't even know it. I don't think anybody, well, maybe somebody said you went through the radiation belt, but we didn't feel it inside, and we didn't get any, added radiation.
So you see, Team Apollo didn't know about this deadly radiation belt that would have killed them, so they weren't affected by it. Another interesting aspect of space travel is that it's not possible because thrust and combustion are not viable in a vacuum. Let's review a couple of experiments in a vacuum chamber that prove what I am talking about. First experiment, thrust in a vacuum.
You see when I turn the fan on, it blows the feather all over the place. This is, of course, at atmospheric pressure right now. So since we're at Martian air pressure, let's unplug the vacuum pump and let's turn on this fan. And place your bets as to what's going to happen to this feather. Now the fan's only going to produce maybe 10 miles per hour worth of wind. On the surface of Mars, the fastest recorded wind speed is about 70 miles an hour. But let's say the superstorm in the Martian had wind speeds of 200 miles an hour, 20 times what we have here. To compensate for that, I imagine the feather is about 20 times easier to push over than a spaceship. So let's see what happens. Okay, fans on. And the feather's not moving. In fact, let's zoom in on that.
Thrust does not work in a vacuum, and thrust would be needed to traverse outer space. Second experiment, combustion in a vacuum.
This is a mixture of sugar, potassium nitrate, and iron oxide. This is used in amateur rockets because the ingredients are readily available and the amount of thrust it produces is quite high. So let's light this on fire and see how it does. So this is in Earth atmosphere. As you can see, it burns rather rapidly, producing a little bit of thrust even. As you can see towards the end, it moved it around. So now let's try it inside of a vacuum. No ignition. That's interesting.
Combustion does not work in a vacuum. This is a very big deal. Space travel falls on its face and breaks it, then dies with these two vacuum chamber experiments. Thanks, Cody's Lab. Outer space is an occultist dream. In the same way that Jack Parsons was obsessed with magic, so too was Walt Disney. You can see it throughout his work with the likes of Fantasia, and you can still see it to this day with how they advertise for Disney.
With Disney innovation and magic behind them, Disney DVDs are breathtaking, fun, interactive. A world filled with magical entertainment awaits you. The magic is at your fingertips. Disney DVD. Pure digital magic.
Welcome to a whole new world of Disney magic. Pure digital magic.
The magic of Disney this, the magic of Disney that, the Magic Kingdom. They even have a Disney cruise ship called Magic. And just like Jack Parsons, Walt Disney was fascinated by rockets. Which in the occult circles are modern-day obelisks. Obelisks are erected all over the Earth plane, and they symbolize domination, power, and political authority. The word obelisk translates to Baal's shaft, Baal as in the god or lord. Therefore, an obelisk is a penis. Speaking of penises, in the movie Toy Story, Woody and Buzz come into contact with references to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. You can see it here on the carpet. It's the same carpet from The Shining, and they did this on purpose. There's a reference to room 237 when Woody is using the computer. Another one on the garbage truck license plate. And another on the cameras in the daycare center. This one even says Overlook, the hotel that The Shining took place in. The Shining was Stanley Kubrick's way of saying that he filmed the moon landings. In the movie, there are references to Tang, the drink that the astronauts took to the moon.
Astronauts to the moon.
Little Danny wearing an Apollo 11 sweater and heading for room 237. Another funny thing about Toy Story is that Tom Hanks plays Woody, and the year it came out is the same year that Apollo 13 came out, with Tom Hanks as the lead. And Tom Hanks also was the executive producer, meaning that he was the main producer behind a project for a 1998 miniseries called From the Earth to the Moon. It's pretty clear that Disney and NASA are connected.
Buzz, I can't believe you were actually in space!
Yeah, it's true. I was the first space ranger to visit the International Space Station.
Way to go, Buzzarino!
Let me show you.
It was a fantastic program between NASA and Disney to send Buzz up and did a tremendous education program, you know, for children all over the world, and I was so proud.
So when you're looking at this timeline, this is the timeline of deception with the space programs of the world, pretending like outer space is a real thing. And you can add in 1928, Richard E. Byrd started exploring Antarctica. And he explored it for years and years and years. And in 1956 was his last expedition to Antarctica. So we can add those two things to the timeline. And just 3 years after Richard Byrd's last expedition to Antarctica, the Antarctic Treaty was established in 1959, just 1 year after NASA was founded. So when you really look at this and pay attention to all this stuff as a whole, you can see that we're being lied to. It seems that they have found the limitations for how far we can travel on this Earth plane and how high we can go in the sky. But don't just take my word for it. I want you to research this. Whether you believe me or you don't believe me, research it for yourself. It becomes very clear that something is going on with the establishment of the Antarctic Treaty right around the time NASA was founded to gatekeep space. It's all there. Just do your own research. Anyway, that's all I have for this one. Thanks for watching. I'm Garland.
Trouble in space this morning as the International Space Crew attempted a spacewalk outside the station. Here's a live look at the astronauts. Well, I don't believe... I don't think those are astronauts. Yeah,
Where's their spacesuit?
My question is, through your career and your writing and your acting, you've inspired so many people to enter the sciences. How do you balance science with science fiction? They're both the same.
One thing I really want your generation to embrace is that the Earth is a closed system. We cannot leave the Earth.
One thing I really want your generation to embrace is that the Earth is a closed system. We cannot leave the Earth.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Wow, Neil Armstrong. Hey, wait a minute. You're supposed to be on the moon. I just saw it on TV.
Oh, there's a tape delay and with all solar winds.
She always loved the pictures.
It's an old federal textbook. We've replaced them with the corrected versions.
Corrected.
Explaining how the Apollo missions were fake.
Folks, it's an honor for me to be working in this studio. This is the very sound stage where we faked the moon landing. And the JFK assassination. No, I'm sorry, this is where we planned the JFK assassination.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened.
Thanks for tuning in to ODDTV. Please be sure to like and share this video. It really helps. Also, don't forget to subscribe.